Hey, this is Eric Durak, and welcome to Med Health Fit, the show that integrates wellness and healthcare. So this portion is the actual second class that we're having on self-care. The first one was on diabetes self-care. This one is on hypertension self-care. And it's a big issue these days because there have been a lot of changes in the world of hypertension, hypertension assessments, and hypertension medical treatments. So let's get started and let's see what diabetes and hypertension prevention and education programs are all about. So let's look at some information here about high blood pressure or hypertension. Did you know that almost 24% of Americans would be classified as having high blood pressure? This was a survey that was done from the NHANES project, which is a big national survey. 69% of that group don't even know that they have high blood pressure. And out of the 24% of Americans who have high blood pressure, over 50% take some kind of hypertension medication to keep those blood pressures under control. 13 million people with normal blood pressure have hypertension at some point. Maybe some point in their life they've been divorced, they have a death in the family, they have a lot of stress at work, their blood pressure goes up. And most people can control what we'll call those episodic renditions or those episodic moments of high blood pressure. They can control it with diet, and they can control it with exercise, and they can control it with breathing and relaxation. So we're going to talk a little bit about those tonight. But first, what I want to really talk about is blood pressure statistics. So, in October of 2017, the American Heart Association got together after months and months and looking at numbers of different journal articles, and they decided that they wanted to revise the numbers for what actually constitutes high blood pressure. Now, for a clinical person like myself who's been doing blood pressures for probably 35, 36, 37 years, I have always known hypertension to be the number 140 millimeters of mercury, that's the systolic reading, the upper number, over 90 diastolic reading. So 140 over 90 was always considered borderline high blood pressure. Well, now let's look at the chart here from American Heart Association. A normal blood pressure now is looked at as about less than 120 milligrams or millimeters of mercury, and the diastolic now is less than 80, okay? A person who has an elevated blood pressure may have a systolic number of 120 to 129, and they still need to have a diastolic blood pressure of less than 80 millimeters of mercury. Interesting. So if you want to be kind of a stage 1 hypertensive, you're going to have a systolic blood pressure now of 130 to 139, and you're going to have a diastolic reading of 80 to 89. So what used to be considered normal blood pressure, 132 over 82, is now considered like stage 1 or phase 1 hypertensive. And stage 2 is now considered 140 or higher, or 90 or higher. And, pray tell, if you have a hypertension number, systolic number of 180, or you have a diastolic number of greater than 120, you have severe hypertension, okay? And not even episodic, may happen once in a while. This is something people are looking at, that it's a crisis. You need to have a very big intervention. But I want to reiterate that what we used to consider normal blood pressure, 132 over 82, is now considered to be that stage 1 or phase 1 low-end hypertension. And the American Heart Association really congratulated themselves on looking at all of these studies and really coming up with these numbers. And there's a good part of this, there's a bad part of this. I'll talk about that in just a second. But what happens when most people go to their doctors and they have high blood pressure, their doctor's going to recommend some sort of blood pressure medication. So the chart that I have here looks at a portion of the more than 80 different types of hypertensive drugs that are used today for patients. And let me just go through some of these. I won't go through all of them, but diuretic drugs, which help restrict water, are loop drugs like Lasix. That's a very popular one. The ones I have highlighted here are the ones that are pretty much used more often. Beta blockers, one of the more used drugs in that category is tenormin. People have heard that name. They hear it on TV and radio and stuff. An ACE inhibitor, which helps stop certain types of metabolic processes, is Vasotec. And we also have a calcium channel agonist, which is called Catapress, which also, they stop certain types of physiologic processes. In a lot of these types of drugs, if they're angiotensin blockers or calcium channel blockers or vasodilators like Loniten, they actually will try to relax the heart, and they will actually try to open up some of the vessels. So those hypertension numbers, there won't be so much stress against the walls of the arteries when it's pumping the blood through. So in general, most of these medications have some of the following side effects. We can see right here. You might have a rash. You might get an irritating cough. Some people who take these over time have bouts of depression. You can actually have a slow heart rate. One of the effects of this is that it actually slows the heart rate down just a little bit. You might get gout over time. You might have impotence, dizziness, swelling, or some of your minerals like potassium may go into imbalance, which means you either have to change your diet or you have to take something for having that mineral imbalance. So many of these drugs have the same side effects, even though they have different mechanisms of action. Either they slow the heart, they dilate the vessels, etc. Most of them have the same types of side effects. So that's one big thing that people have to realize, that if they are diagnosed with hypertension, they have to take one or maybe more of these types of medications, they may actually experience some side effects that create their own issues. And I remember reading an interesting article in January of 2018 regarding this change in blood pressure. And from the holistic side, people who now have to have a lower blood pressure, about 20% more people now can be prescribed medication. So the person who wrote this article was, I think it was from Mercola.com, was basically saying that this is a kind of a ploy by the medical profession to get more people on antihypertension drugs. Well, it may be. I'm not going to debate that point, but one of the things that I do know is that the goal, once you're on a hypertension medication, is to get off of it. Because hypertension is something that can be controlled very naturally. And in our program tonight, we're going to talk about the ways that you can actually combine certain types of things like exercise meditation, diet meditation, combination of these things to really make sure that your blood pressure is low, it stays low. When you're in times of stress, it doesn't get as high. All right, so let's look at the goal. The goal now is to keep your blood pressure under 130/80. One of the reasons why is that we look at the third line here, the death rate from hypertension is rising or has risen by almost 23% since the year 2001. So more people who have hypertension are actually dying from it as opposed to getting a secondary type of disease and dying prematurely from that. So how do the doctors respond to the new guidelines? I'm sure that doctors are going to be prescribing medications. That's pretty much what they do. And what I want to do is give you some steps here in the program tonight to really make sure that you understand different types of things that you can do to help your self-care program for blood pressure. So let's look at some numbers here. First thing we should know is for your body weight, what is your BMI or your body mass index? And we actually spoke about that in our first episode on self-care in diabetes. For men, it's about 18 to 25, and for women, it's about 18 to 27. Now it's an arbitrary number, but it really lines up to your body weight, and it also correlates very well to your body fat amount as well. but most doctors and health professionals understand what BMI is because they've been using it for maybe 40 or 50 years. In men, your resting heart rate should be somewhere between 55 and 70. For women, it should be about the same. Your systolic blood pressure now should be under 130. Same with women. Your diastolic number for men and women should now be under 80, and under 90 is actually still hypertensive, okay? So we really need to understand that 130 over 90 in both men and women is now considered hypertension. Well, what's the amount of sodium that men and women should be taking in? Both of them about 2,300 milligrams a day. I find this interesting because if sodium is a trigger for hypertension, and men usually weigh out women by 50 to 70 pounds, I'm wondering, shouldn't men have maybe a little bit higher level of sodium just because of their body weight? That's an interesting question. And here the blood sugar, for men it should be less than 160 after a meal, and for women it should be around 150 milligrams per deciliter of sugar or less. So these are some of the numbers that doctors will look at when they're assessing someone who may be just newly diagnosed with hypertension. So now, the second part of this program is can blood pressure be lowered naturally? And of course the question is yes. Before there were medications for blood pressure, people had to lose weight, they had to change their diet, and they had to do some sort of relaxation. So what I want to look at here is some of the following. I want to first start you out with the work of Dr. Herbert Benson from Harvard. He's the guy who really kind of started the whole meditation and mind-body thing in America. I want to talk about meditation, nutrition, moderate exercise, and weight loss. So we're going to chunk each one of these in their own separate section here, and we're going to talk about it. So this is Dr. Herbert Benson. In 1972, I think, he wrote a book called The Relaxation Response. And he did it after, looking at hundreds of studies, some of which he did in the 60s, looking at relaxation and its effects on things like blood pressure control, blood sugar control, general stress and tension. And he founded the Mind-Body Medical Institute at Harvard back in the late 70s. And since then, he's been doing research, and he's been having destination programs for people to come in and learn about relaxation and learn about it through a number of different areas. He's the guy that talked about fight or flight in regards to blood pressure control. And he actually said that a lot of things can be done to calm the body utilizing things like Tai Chi, breathing, listening to relaxation music, or just sitting quietly certain times during the day. So he was a big proponent of doing simple things on a regular basis to modulate or regulate a person's hypertension status. Okay? So the second part of our program here was looking at meditation and relaxation. And here we have local practitioner, Dr. Roger Yanka, who has been working in the field of Tai Chi and meditation for almost 40 years now, and he is considered one of the world's leading authorities. And Dr. Roger says that doing Tai Chi on a regular basis promotes a sort of a medicinal wellness in the body. He says that breathing, doing certain types of movement exercises strengthens bones and muscles. It helps the central nervous system. It helps the respiratory system, and it helps the relaxation system in the body by doing this. And of course, he's done some studies with groups around the country to look at the research effects of doing meditation and Tai Chi over long periods of time. He actually has a national certification. He trains Tai Chi instructors. So he has put many, many years into the study of looking at Tai Chi and meditation and how beneficial they are in lowering blood pressure as one of the side effect benefits of performing these on a regular basis. Well, the next thing that I talked about was a person's diet. And most people have no idea about the foods they put into their mouth and how they may have an effect on something like their blood pressure. So if you can look at this slide here, and if you do one of these types of things, like drink Coca-Cola, or eat hot dogs, or you like to have donuts every day, or you drink 1, 2, 3 glasses of alcohol on a daily basis. Or you do some of the other things. You eat a lot of popcorn, you eat canned soups, you have things like French fries and other types of fast foods on a regular basis. Because of the sodium content, the high fat content, and because how processed those foods are, they really take a toll on not just the digestive system, but they take a toll on blood pressure. They constrict the vessels, they create problems with certain metabolic processes, with excess sodium and excess sugar, and these may be some of the big components of people suffering from things like high blood pressure. Those are very simple to change. What we can do is we can look at things like having vegetables, eating certain types of berries, certain types of meats like salmon, and certain types of oils like olive oil, grapeseed oil in the diet. Eating things like oatmeal with bananas. Oatmeal's low glycemic index, but all of these types of foods are very good for people who suffer from high blood pressure. One of the interesting ones on the right here is dark chocolate. What most people don't know is that eating dark chocolates does have an antihypertensive effect, and it has for many years. You want to make sure that you get a good organic chocolate, but it's one of those types of foods that most people put into the snack category or the high sugar category, so don't eat that. Whereas with high blood pressure, it may be something that on a daily or bi-daily basis may actually be beneficial to help you regulate your blood sugars. Well, let's look at a sensible breakfast now for someone who has hypertension. What would you eat? Well, let's say that you had 2 scrambled eggs, 30 calories, 100 milligrams of sugar, whole grain muffin, small bowl of yogurt, small bowl of fruit, maybe you mix those two together, and a handful of nuts. So your total calories for that light breakfast is about 565 with about 282 milligrams of sodium. So you've got good protein, you've got good fats, you've got your nuts, egg whites, etc., things that you've eaten, very low calorie, very high energy type food. So you go through your day, you're working, you say, what am I going to have for lunch? Well, let's look at a very small serving here. We've got strawberries, 3 or 4, they're only 15 calories, half a small chicken breast, slice of avocado, 2 slices of avocado, okay, that's 160 calories, a small salad bowl, and herb tea. So you have a cup of herb tea, very few calories. So for lunch now, you only have 350 calories, but you only have 366 milligrams of sodium. So if you remember one of the early slides where you say that your daily sodium intake can be 2,300 milligrams, we're only at 500 right now, and we've got 2 meals out of the way. So we've got delicious foods, we've got nice, good dietary fats, omega-3s, low-calorie herb tea. We're really doing well today, and again, low calories and low milligrams. All right, so we got those down. We need a sensible dinner. All right, so we're being sensible here because we got to get that blood pressure down. So we're having a bowl of chicken soup. That's a little high, though, in sodium, all right? But that's all right. We've got plenty to play with here today. We're having a glass of iced tea, some apple slices, a couple of pieces of French bread, and for dessert, we're going to have a little sorbet, all right? So the total calories at dinner is only 440. We got 750 milligrams, but most of that is in the soup, all right? So for the day, we've only consumed about 1,350 calories, which is a very, very good, almost a weight loss type protein or type meal plan. And we have 1,400 milligrams of sodium, less than half or almost half of the sodium that that doctors say that you could have during the course of a day. So we're way under 2,000 milligrams. So we've got really, really good foods. They're tasty. We've got a little dessert in there. Maybe we'll throw in a chocolate bar at the end. That's maybe another 100, 150 calories. So we're only at 1,450 to 1,500 calories a day, which is still a weight maintenance or even a weight loss type of eating pattern. And we're really good on the levels of sodium that we have. Now, the best way that you can have sensible eating is absolutely to have sensible shopping. When you go into the food store, you have to be very, very cognizant of the types of foods that you buy. You have to stay in the outside lanes, because the outside lanes, they have the breads, they have the vegetables, they have the fruits, all right? They have the yogurts, the eggs, they have, in many cases, the meats, sometimes the cheeses. It's when you get into the inner aisles is where you get the box foods, the saltine crackers, the frozen foods, the high processed foods, the high sugar foods. If you can stay on the outside, for the most part, you're going to get the freshest foods and you're going to get the foods that have the best quality. You want to make sure that you buy good breads. And most people say, well, what does that have to do with anything? And I say, well, if you go to a bread store and you buy challah bread, you buy French bread, you buy a baguette, you buy ciabatta bread, all of these types of things are specialty made, and they don't have nearly the amount of preservatives or other types of additives that white bread or some of the breads that you buy in the grocery stores have. So I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to have breads, you might sure it might cost you a little bit more, but from a health standpoint, they absolutely are well worth it. I'm also a big proponent of shopping at farmers markets, because that's really where you'll get, in most cases, the freshest fruits and vegetables at the lowest prices. And you want to shop in terms of meal planning. You're not just going to buy a bunch of milk and a bunch of cheese or whatever and say, well, I'll have this for a couple days. You actually want to plan out, I'm going to cook some meats here, and those meats are going to last me for meals for 4, 5, or 6 days. We can keep those in the refrigerator. So sensible shopping is really one of the big things in terms of blood pressure control. Well, we talked about Tai Chi and meditation, but we didn't say that they were actual exercise programs. We actually said they were more meditative type programs. Walking, yoga, stretching, rhythmic exercise like bicycling, walking, etc., elliptical machines, cycle machines, etc. at the gym. Those are some of the best exercises to help reduce blood pressures. And the reason is because you're not lifting heavy and you don't have any big jumpy types exercises. We call them, in the business, we call it no ballistic exercises. Ballistic exercises are explosive, like sprinting at the track or jumping up and down on a box. They're fine for sports training, but they might not be something that is certainly beneficial for keeping your blood pressures low. And also, one of the things that I have 2 things here at the bottom. The first thing is work to rest ratio. And I always tell and have said to clients for many years, if you want to get fit faster, you have to rest for a smaller amount of time. You exercise more, you rest less. And we call that the work to rest ratio. So if you do 30 repetitions on the chest press machine and that takes you 25 seconds, and you rest for 55 seconds, that's a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio. Most people sometimes will do a set and they'll rest for 5 minutes. That's a lot. That's a 1-to-10 work to rest ratio. I like to do almost a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 every time I go into the gym, because I like to get my workout over with. But in terms of exercising for blood pressure control, you want to make sure that you exercise and you get the proper amount of rest. So for blood pressure control, you may want to do a 1-to-5 work to rest ratio. So for every 30 seconds that you exercise, especially on the weights, you do a 2.5 minute rest. So if you're exercising on a bike and you do 5 minutes, you might want to rest for 10 minutes and then go on to another machine. Because again, the main purpose here isn't that you're going to train for a marathon. The main purpose for this exercise is that you want to lower your blood pressures. So you want to take a blood pressure reading before you train, and you want to take a blood pressure reading after you train. Okay, it's got to make sense. You have to know what the effect of your exercise has. A lot of exercise programs used today may or may not be good for hypertension, like the HIIT method, which is high intensity interval training. Well, a lot of people who do that type of interval program may or may not get the benefits for their blood pressures. So if you train for 60 seconds and rest for 120, or that's 2 minutes, your work to rest ratio is 1-to-2. It's possible to train for 1-to-1, but it takes practice. All right? So I think that for people who do exercise training, looking at work to rest ratios is very important. And the higher your blood pressure is, chances are the more rest that you may need to take when you do your exercise. Well, you don't know what your blood pressure is unless you have a monitor. And today, you can buy a blood pressure monitor online on Amazon for between $25 and $200, depending on how fancy you want to get. You can measure your blood pressure every day, and you can look at trends. Well, why is it higher in the morning? I did this 1-hour exercise and look at what happened to my blood pressure. I slept really well last night. I woke up, my blood pressure was great. Or I didn't sleep well at all last night, my blood pressure's through the roof. So you want to look at types of factors that have an effect on your blood pressures on a daily basis. So the good news with this slide is that you can monitor your blood pressures because you can have your own unit that you can buy right online. It's fantastic. Your sleep program, you should go to sleep about the same time every night. You should do some breathing exercises when you go to bed. That helps oxygenate your system, helps you go to sleep faster. You should get up around the same time in the morning. And if you can't sleep, try to stay in bed. Try to meditate your way back to sleep. There have been many times where myself, personally, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, get on the computer, and man, I'm there for half an hour, and then you don't get back to sleep. So I know this one very well, and I try when I go to sleep at night, deep breath for a few minutes, and I usually can get to sleep fairly quickly. Well, like in the diabetes program, we had a slide called There's an App for That. So here, I've got 3 apps that I think are going to be good. The first one is called Family Light, and it gives stats on all of your blood pressure readings, and it's free. It's a free app you can download. Every time you take a blood pressure, you can put it in the app. You can see those trends. The second one is called Blood Pressure Companion. It also gives free stats, but it can interface with your physician. So if you take a bunch of blood pressure readings, you can actually send those to your doctor's office via their phone, and it can get on your electronic health records. I think that's a very cool app. And the last one is called BPMON, which gives color-coded stats, and it works with a Bluetooth and also with a blood pressure cuff. It's a $3.99 download. All 3 of these apps do really good work. I like all of them. I actually like Family Light better. That's one of the best ones. So where will you be in 3 months? You should have some weight loss. You should be able to monitor your blood pressure regularly. You should be managing your stress a little bit better after 3 months. You have some changes in your daily routine, and by now you're exercising on a regular basis. So a year from now, you should actually have a healthy body weight. You should be off your blood pressure medicines either completely, or you should maybe only be taking them sporadically. You know what your blood pressures look like because, hey, you can monitor them every day, and you've changed at least one aspect of your life. You know that you're sleeping better, you've improved your sodium intake, you eat less fat or you eat better fats during the course of the day. You have moderate exercise, and maybe you've joined a gym or a health club and you're feeling great. So all of those things together are your blood pressure monitoring and self-care program. I hope you enjoyed this. For MedHealth Fit, this is Eric Durack, and thanks for watching.